Hello again, folks. So this is the next part in our Baptist history series, and we're going to be looking at the first peace treaty between these five established churches we were looking at before, and also going into the fourth period of 1600 to 1900 AD, which is nearly up to getting 19th century and into the 21st century. So let's have a look at this stuff. So the first peace treaty in 1555 AD. So in their beginnings, all of these five churches persecuted one another, as well as everyone else, even though they were people claiming to be followers of the meek and lowly Jesus Christ. At a council held in Augsburg, Germany in 1555, there was a peace treaty made between the Catholics and the Lutherans, agreeing not to persecute one another. You leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. For Catholics to fight Lutherans meant war with Germany, and for the Lutherans to fight Catholics meant Germany at war with all Catholic nations. So you can see here, this was the first peace treaty. In the fourth period, which is from 1600 AD to 1900 AD, the 17th century, which is from 1600 to 1700 AD, begins with the rise of a new denomination, the Congregationalists. They were not satisfied with the Reformation made by Luther and Calvin, and decided that the idea of preacher rule and church state together was not biblical. So they returned to the New Testament democratic idea that was held by Baptists over 1500 years prior to that, when Constantine's hierarchy began. This brought on their head persecution by all of the five established churches, but yet still had some Catholic-made errors, including infant baptism, pouring and sprinkling, and later on fell back into this church-state government idea. So, the King James Bible, of course, came onto the scene in 1611, which is it changed the world as we know it. Never before had the Bible been given so extensively to the people for them to read themselves, which also in turn started the heavy decline of papal authority and was the beginning of the idea of religious liberty. In 1648, it became the Peace of Westphalia, which was a triple agreement and peace treaty written at the end of the 30 Years' War between the Catholics, Lutherans, and Presbyterians in Europe. It confirmed the first peace treaty and added other Protestant denominations that they would not persecute one another. This did not end persecution for all Christians, but only for the established churches that we spoke about, these five. The Baptists still received heavy and dire persecution for standing against any of these other denominations and their false doctrines. In England in 1688 came the first softening of regulations with the Toleration Act, which permitted the worship of all peoples except two, the Catholics and the Unitarians. Unitarians reject that Jesus is God, they believe in monotheism. The 1689 UK Bill of Rights, which still remains in effect today, states that no monarch may be Catholic or married to a Catholic. Sadly, the Anglican Church is and always will be diet Catholic. But yeah, the Second Toleration Act came in 1778, which now included toleration of Catholics. The Third Toleration Act was in 1813 and now included the Unitarians. And in 1828 and 29 came the Test Act, which gave dissenters, which were another name for the Baptists and many others who were not in accordance with the Church of England, gave them access to public office and Parliament. And in 1836 to 37 and 1844 came the Registration and Marriage Acts. These two made legal baptisms and marriages performed by Baptists and other what they call dissenters. The Reform Bill came in 1854, and up until now no dissenter or child of a dissenter could enter Oxford or Cambridge University, but now they could. All of this to make this point: religious freedom cannot exist in a country with an established state church. It will always be at best toleration, and in most cases will involve persecution of those not in the alignment of these states. So, now we're going to mention the Methodist Church. So there were three boys that were born in the early 18th century, and they caused a massive stir in the Church of England. This was John Wesley in 1703, Charles Wesley, his brother, in 1708, and George Whitefield in 1714, and were responsible for Methodism. So they were all members of the Church of England, and they were all studying for the ministry, yet none of them were saved at this point. And later on, they were truly and gloriously saved and converted. They earnestly strove for a revival of pure spiritual reformation within the Church of England. They tried in both England and America, and the Church of England closed their doors to them, and these men often held services in the open air or other churches. Their first organizations were called societies, with the First Methodist Episcopal Church in Baltimore in 1784. They carried a number of errors out with them from their mother and grandmother churches, the preacher church government, the infant baptism and sprinkling. Yet one thing that was very different seems to be their understanding of salvation, which was by grace, through faith alone. And that's important as we look forward, because we know that the Methodist Church had a good understanding of what salvation was. So they didn't believe in baptismal regeneration. They believed that baptism is something that is done after the fact that you're saved, which makes a lot of sense. And we have scripture backing this up too. So it was an important time. You can see that there was a lot of persecution between these churches and the Baptists. At first, they were persecuting everybody in every which way, all one another. Then the peace treaties came, where the established churches, government state churches, were they agreed not to persecute one another. But still, throughout, this trail of blood still carried on through the Baptists. The Baptists were still the ones persecuted for standing up for the truth. And I get a lot of trouble these days for standing up for the truth, and it just shows that, it tends to be that it's you have the for example, when Elijah was stood alone against all the prophets of Baal, he was there alone with God, and he still had the majority, and he was still the one who was right amongst all the people that were persecuting him and telling him that their God was the real God. And these things will all come to a head one day, but we're just trying to share the truth with people that the trade of blood has always been there since Christ, who shed his blood. There has been bloodshed and bloodshed and bloodshed of the people who hold to the truth. And this for me is a great evidence of something being true. And so we thank you for tuning in. Well, next time we're going to be looking at faith and religion in America as part of this movement. So when we see what happened to the churches as they travelled across the seas to America, and America was started, we'll see just what happened there. And I look forward to going into that with you. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. Cheers.